We all know Zeus is immortal, but there was a time when something almost destroyed the king of the gods. Not weakened him, not challenged him, almost destroyed him. There was a moment recorded in the oldest verses the ancient world ever committed to stone and papyrus, when the throne of Olympus stood empty, when the sky had no master, when the seas churned without command and the earth burned without consequence, and when the being the Greeks called the father of gods and men lay in a cave, stripped of his divine power, unable to move, unable to fight, unable to even call lightning to his hand. The king of all creation had been broken, and the thing that broke him was still out there. Stay with this story, because what you are about to hear is not the Zeus of victory hymns and golden temples. This is the Zeus the priests spoke of in hushed voices. This is the story they told to explain why certain mountains still breathe fire, why certain storms feel less like weather and more like wrath, and why, even at the height of Olympian power, the Greeks never entirely stopped being afraid of what lived beneath the earth. This is the story of Typhon, the last great enemy, the closest the cosmos ever came to ending. But to feel the full weight of what Typhon nearly accomplished, you must first understand what it cost to build the world he nearly tore apart. Because the reign of Zeus did not begin gently. It was purchased in suffering, in war, in a decade of cosmic violence so total that the earth still carries its scars. Before Zeus, before Olympus, before any order governed the turning of the world, the Titans ruled. Ancient, enormous, ungoverned, they were the first children of Gaia, the earth herself, and of Uranos, the sky. At their head sat Cronus, who had overthrown his own father with iron and blood, and who ruled with the particular cruelty of a tyrant who knows, in the deepest part of himself, that his reign was stolen and can therefore be stolen again. A prophecy haunted him. One of his children would rise and end him, exactly as he had ended his father. And so Cronus did what frightened tyrants do: he consumed the future. Each child his wife Rhea bore him, he took and swallowed whole. Hestia, Demeter, Hera, Hades, Poseidon, all of them devoured before they could become a threat. But Rhea deceived him once. She wrapped a stone in swaddling cloth, and Cronus swallowed the stone. The child Zeus was spirited away to Crete, hidden in a cave on Mount Ida, raised in secret by nymphs and the sound of clashing bronze that drowned his infant cries from his father's ears. And there, in that hidden place, Zeus grew. He grew into something Cronus had never anticipated, not merely a powerful god, but a patient one, a strategic one. One who understood that raw power alone does not win wars, that you need allies, timing, and the willingness to sacrifice everything for the moment that matters. When Zeus finally moved against his father, he did not come alone. He freed his swallowed siblings from Cronus's belly. He descended into Tartarus and released the Cyclopes, those one-eyed divine smiths who forged in gratitude the thunderbolts that would become Zeus's signature, his weapon, his identity. He freed the Hecatoncheires, the hundred-handed ones, beings of such overwhelming physical force that the Titans themselves had feared them enough to imprison them. And with this coalition, Zeus waged the Titanomachy. 10 years of war that split mountains and reversed rivers and made the sky itself a battlefield. The Titans were enormous, ancient, furious, but in the end, the combination of Zeus's thunderbolts, his siblings' power, and the world-shattering strength of the hundred-handed ones overwhelmed them. The Titans fell, Tartarus opened, the chains descended. And Zeus stood over a world finally, truly ordered, divided between himself, Poseidon, and Hades, governed by divine law, held in the careful architecture of Olympian rule. He had won everything. And that is exactly when Gaia decided she had seen enough. Gaia, remember that name, because this story cannot be understood without her. She is not a villain in any simple sense. She is the earth, literally, primordially, the consciousness beneath the ground we walk on, the mother of all things that have ever lived, the oldest awareness in existence. She had watched as her Titan children were cast into the abyss by their own grandchildren. Had watched Zeus, whom she herself had helped preserve as an infant, use his power to imprison those she had birthed into the darkness. And something within her, something as vast and impersonal as geology, as patient as stone, decided that the Olympians had gone far enough. She had tried the giants. The Gigantomachy, that second great war, born from Gaia's grief, waged by enormous earthborn warriors against the gods of Olympus, had failed. The Olympians had won again, this time with the crucial assistance of the mortal Heracles, whose half-divine nature provided the prophecy required for the giants' defeat. But Gaia's grief did not diminish, and her power did not diminish. She reached down, past the roots of the world's oldest mountains, past the rivers of molten stone that flow in the darkness beneath the crust of the earth, down into the void of Tartarus itself, and she called upon the father of the deepest dark, Tartarus, not the place, but the primordial entity the place is named for, the abyss made conscious, the darkness before darkness. Together, earth and abyss conceived a child. And when Typhon was born, the world did not merely shake. The world remembered what it had been before there were gods to govern it. What Typhon looked like, truly looked like, in the full horror of his undiminished form, is something the ancient poets approached with the careful steps of people describing something they cannot entirely bear to see. Hesiod, the oldest voice we have on this, writes of him with a reverence that is indistinguishable from terror. From the waist upward, Typhon wore the shape of a man, but a man whose scale broke the meaning of the word. His head, when he stood to his full height, did not reach the clouds. It passed through them. It scraped the dark ceiling of the sky itself, the solid vault of the heavens, and when he tilted it back and opened the mouths of his 100 serpent heads to scream, the sound reached the stars. His arms, stretched wide, would have cast shadows over kingdoms, and from his shoulders, in place of human appendages, erupted 100 heads of serpents, some say dragons, each one possessed of its own will, its own voice, its own terrible intelligence. Those voices, every account that has survived from antiquity circles back to the voices, as though the writers could not free themselves from the sound even long after the telling. Some heads roared like lions, deep and resonant and final sounding. The kind of roar that does not invite response. Others bellowed like bulls at the precise pitch that makes the human body understand, without the mediation of thought, that it is prey. Some hissed, and the hissing was somehow worse than the roaring, because it was quiet and patient and seemed to know exactly what it was doing. And some heads made sounds that belonged to no animal, no instrument, no element of the natural world, sounds that lived below the threshold of hearing and above it simultaneously, felt in the bone and the gut, and that ancient part of the mind that existed before consciousness gave it language. Below the waist, Typhon dissolved into pure serpent, not one, but a writhing, churning mass of coils as thick as rivers, each alive with its own independent strength, together capable of crushing mountains the way a hand crushes dry clay. Fire poured from his eyes, not the warm fire of torches or even the fierce fire of forgework, but something older and hotter, the fire of the earth's interior, the fire that does not need fuel because it is itself the substance of destruction. When he exhaled, the air tasted of scorched iron. When he moved, the ground did not merely tremble, it fractured. Long, deep cracks chased his path across the earth as though the planet itself was trying to escape him. He turned toward Olympus and he screamed, "Now hold this image, hold it and ask yourself, what would you do?" The gods of Olympus, those divine beings that the entire ancient world had organized itself around, prayed to, sacrificed animals to, built marble temples gleaming with gold in honor of, they looked at Typhon, and they fled. Not some of them, every single one. Ares, the god of war who bathed in blood and called battle a pleasure, he ran. Apollo, the radiant archer whose arrows never missed and whose light drove back darkness, he ran. Hermes, whose cunning was the sharpest instrument in heaven. Hephaestus, who had forged the very thunderbolts in Zeus's hands. Aphrodite, deathless and sovereign. Artemis, the huntress whose aim was divine law. Hera herself, queen of heaven, ran. They did not transform into divine battle forms or call upon their most devastating powers. They transformed into animals, birds, fish, beasts of the field, and they fled into Egypt and hid themselves in the reeds of the Nile, trembling in shapes not their own, unrecognizable, abandoned by their own dignity. The gods of the world were hiding in a river, in disguise, because of one creature. If this story grips you the way it has gripped every person who has ever heard it told in full, and it will, let it carry you forward. What happens next is the part that changes the entire mythology of Zeus forever. There was one god who did not run. one who stood on the peak of Olympus as Typhon's screaming shook the mountain to its roots, and looked down at the creature rising from the earth, and made a choice that the cosmos itself would hang upon. Zeus descended. He came down from the mountain with both hands blazing, thunderbolts, divine fire, the full concentrated force of the sky, and he went to meet Typhon on the open plain. The first collision remade the landscape in a moment. Zeus hurled his thunderbolts with the precision and force that had shattered the Titans, and Typhon reeled, his serpent heads thrashing, fire and divine lightning meeting in a storm of energy that scorched the earth black for miles in every direction. The mountains cracked at the sound. The sea pulled back from its shores as if flinching. And for a blazing, terrible moment, it seemed as though Zeus would simply overpower the beast, that the story would end here, that the king of the gods would prove that no created thing could truly challenge him. But what happened next would shake the heavens and shatter every assumption. Typhon did not fall. He absorbed the thunderbolts the way the ocean absorbs rain, with vast, patient indifference, and he closed the distance between himself and Zeus with a speed that defied his catastrophic size. His serpentine coils surged forward. His 100 heads came down like a storm of striking serpents. And before Zeus could bring the full force of his divine arsenal to bear, Typhon was upon him, not fighting the way warriors fight, not trading blows in the grammar of battle, but engulfing, overwhelming, wrapping the king of the gods in coils of world-crushing force. And then he did something that no being in all the mythology of Greece had ever done to Zeus before. He reached into him and he cut out his sinews. This is the detail the myths preserve without softening, without metaphor, without the merciful vagueness of allegory. Typhon tore from the body of Zeus the ligaments of his divine power, the sinews, the tendons, the connective tissue of a god, and he held them aloft. The thing that makes Zeus Zeus, the physical substrate of his divine strength, the architecture of his power, gone, ripped out, held in the hands of a monster that was laughing in 100 different voices. Zeus collapsed. The king of the gods, the thunderer, the being who had defeated Cronus and imprisoned the Titans and established the ordered cosmos. He lay on the earth, divine and helpless, reduced to something that could not move and could not fight, and could only understand, in the blinding clarity of defeat, how catastrophically the situation had deteriorated. Typhon carried the broken king of the gods to a cave in Cilicia, the Coruscaean cave, dark and deep and remote, and he left him there, immobilized, imprisoned not by chains, but by the simple absence of everything that made him capable. The sinews he stored nearby, wrapped in a bearskin, guarded by a she-dragon named Delphine, cold-eyed and patient and ancient in the way of all things that live underground and do not require light. The sky had no master, the cosmos had no king. Typhon walked the world and no one stopped him. If you have ever wondered why the Greeks, even at the height of their civilization, maintained such a profound and personal relationship with the concept of divine vulnerability, why their gods bleed, suffer, fail, feel, this moment is the answer. This is the wound at the center of the Olympian order, the crack in the foundation that every subsequent myth is quietly built around. The king had fallen, and the world had continued turning, indifferent to his absence. But here, right here, is where the story does something entirely unexpected, because salvation, when it came, did not arrive in the form of a warrior. It did not come riding on divine light or armed with cosmic weapons. It crept in quietly on the feet of a trickster and the hooves of a wild god. Hermes had not entirely lost his wits in the terror of Typhon's arrival. The messenger of the gods, the divine thief, the being whose mind moved faster than fear, he had run with the others, yes. But he had not surrendered. And Pan, that raw, unpredictable deity of the untamed wild, half-goat and wholly dangerous, the god whose shout could shatter rational thought and replace it with the mindless, animal need to flee, Pan had in him something that would not submit to despair. Together, these two unlikely saviors moved back toward the cave, toward Delphine, toward the bearskin, toward the stolen sinews of the king. What exactly passed between Hermes and the she-dragon is told with elegant brevity in the ancient sources, as though the detail of the deception is less important than the fact of it. Hermes distracted her, with guile, with the silver-tongued divine cunning that had been his gift since the morning of his birth, when he had stolen Apollo's cattle as an infant and talked his way out of punishment with arguments so clever that Apollo laughed despite himself. While Hermes occupied Delphine's attention, the sinews were recovered. They brought them back to Zeus, and what happened in that cave, in the moment when a god received back what had been taken from him, the ancient texts are silent on the details, and perhaps that silence is the most honest response. Some things cannot be narrated. Some restorations happen in a space beyond language. But the result was unmistakable. Zeus rose, and the sky remembered what it was for. He came back into the world not as the god who had first descended to face Typhon, not with the confidence of a ruler who has never truly been tested, but as something harder, something forged by the experience of absolute defeat into a different quality of determination. He had been broken and restored. He had lain helpless while chaos walked his cosmos. He had felt the weight of a world without order, and the feeling had not diminished him. It had clarified him. Every thunderbolt he now carried meant something it had not fully meant before. He found Typhon, and the final battle began. It was enormous in a way that the word enormous cannot survive intact. Zeus rained thunderbolts from the sky in an unrelenting torrent, not individual strikes, but a continuous, overwhelming downpour of divine fire that scorched the air itself and turned the earth beneath Typhon's coiling body to glass. Typhon answered with the mountains, whole peaks, ripped from the ground with the casual strength of something that regards geography as a weapon, hurled at the sky with enough force to crack the vault of heaven. The ancient sources name specific mountains, hurled, deflected, redirected, struck by lightning mid-flight, and turned against their thrower. The landscape of the ancient Mediterranean was remade in this exchange, peak by peak, in a battle that the earth still carries the marks of. But Typhon was not finished. Even under the full, restored, undiluted fury of Zeus's divine assault, the creature pushed back. His fires met Zeus's lightning in the sky between them and created storms that drenched entire regions in burning rain. His serpent heads struck at the thunderbolts themselves, absorbing and deflecting divine energy, as though the laws of the cosmos simply did not apply to something old enough to predate them. And in the grinding, shattering midpoint of the battle, Typhon managed to wound Zeus again, to touch him with fire, to press him backward, to make the king of the gods fight for ground rather than glory. The gods watching from the edges of the world, those that had crept back from Egypt, emboldened by Zeus's return but not yet certain of the outcome, held the breath that gods do not need but hold anyway in the face of something genuinely uncertain, because this was not theater. This was not a story where the conclusion was guaranteed. This was the cosmos on a scale without a net, and the being that had already beaten Zeus once was pressing him again, and the question was not rhetorical. What finally broke Typhon was not a single blow. It was the sustained, relentless application of everything Zeus had, every thunderbolt, every reserve, every last measure of divine force poured into the battle, without calculation or restraint, the fighting of a being who has decided that the concept of holding something back no longer applies. The 100 serpent heads began to fail under the accumulated devastation. The voices fell silent, one by one, the lions roar, the bulls bellow, the cold hissing intelligence, each extinguished like fires running out of air. The coiling lower body that had churned continents began to slow. The fire in those terrible eyes dimmed. Typhon fell. He fell the way the oldest things fall, not quickly, not cleanly, but with a totality that changed the topography of the world. His body crashed to earth in Sicily, and Zeus, standing over him in the scorched aftermath of the most violent battle in the history of creation, made a choice that would echo in the earth's memory forever. He did not attempt to destroy Typhon. Perhaps he could not. Perhaps some things, made of the oldest substance of the world, simply cannot cease to exist. They can only be contained, the way fire is contained not by extinguishing it, but by depriving it of space. Zeus took Mount Etna, that great Sicilian peak already charged with the fire of the earth's interior, and he pressed it down over Typhon's broken body, driving the last great enemy of Olympus into the earth, sealing him beneath volcanic stone and the weight of a mountain. And there, according to the Greeks who told this story for 1,000 years, Typhon remains, not dead, never dead, simply buried, pinned beneath the mountain by the combined weight of Zeus's power and the geological reality of the Earth's own fire, still breathing, still turning slowly in the darkness of his prison. When Etna erupts, when the mountain opens and sends columns of fire and ash into the Sicilian sky, they knew what that was. That was Typhon shifting. That was the last enemy, restless in his imprisonment, the ancient chaos reminding the ordered world that it has not been destroyed, only contained, only pressed down, only held in check by the ongoing, unrelenting weight of everything that Olympus represents. If this story has reached something in you, some deep place where mythology stops being ancient and starts being true, carry that feeling with you and share it, because stories like this one deserve to be heard. The Greeks named the typhoon after him, those catastrophic spiraling storms that come from nowhere and consume everything in their path, his breath, escaping from the cracks in his prison, every devastating wind that bears no explanation, every tempest that arrives without warning and leaves devastation in its wake, carries in its very name the memory of what happened in that war. He is written into the weather, into the earth, into the fire that never stops burning beneath the mountain. And this is the truth the myth was always trying to tell, not that Zeus is invincible, but that he is not. Not that the gods are beyond harm, but that they bleed and fail and fall and rise again. Not that order is the natural state of the cosmos, but that it must be fought for and nearly lost and reclaimed and defended always, because beneath every ordered world, in the darkness beneath its foundations, something older and angrier is still breathing. The fire under the mountain does not go out. Zeus reigns, the thunderbolts are in his hands again, the sky is governed, the seas are commanded, the stars turn in their ancient courses. But there is a cave in Cilicia where a god once lay broken, and a mountain in Sicily where the earth still smokes, and a sound in the worst of storms that is older than prayer and older than fear, older than the gods themselves. That sound has a name, and the mountain is still burning.